Hey everybody, it is Mr. George, and today I put together a video um, on how to do document analysis, or how do you analyze a document. This comes up in my class all the time, especially in the context of doing a DBQ, a document-based question. So today we're going to look at a quick video on how to analyze a document and what that actually means. So let's just look at the steps involved here. So first thing you want to do is you want to read the document. If the document is just an image, then obviously you just kind of want to look at it. So we're going to read the document and then take some notes on what you're reading. So what does it actually tell you? Things that are kind of obvious, things that on the surface when you're looking at it, it just pretty much tells you. We're then going to look at HIPP, H-I-P-P. We'll go over that in a second as far as ways of helping you come up with like some more notes. As well as you're going to have to start to look at something and infer some things. So for example, what does this document tell you? What ideas does this document trying to advance, even though it doesn't explicitly tell you? So when I talk about document analysis, that's kind of a question that I pose to my students is, what are some of the ideas that this document is really trying to advance? And especially inferring things within a document. What is this image try and tell you? As well as ultimately within the context of a DBQ, we're trying to categorize not just this document, but all the documents so that we can kind of create some groups so ultimately we can come up with a thesis. I have another video on that, so let's just look at just looking at a couple of examples. So what I want to do first of all is just look at HIPP. So as far as HIPP, it's an acronym. It's an acronym that kind of helps you. Oops, sorry about that. It's an acronym that's going to help us. So as far as, here's some prompts for you. So as far as the H, we're looking at historical context. So who created this source? What do we know about the time period in which this document was produced? So this is helpful when you're looking at something, trying to put yourself in, what do you think it was like living at that time? That may help us understand the context of this document. When was it produced? Where was it produced? Why is the source important? How might this information affect the meaning of the source? So we're kind of looking at some trying to provide some background information so that when we're looking at the document, it may kind of give us a glimpse as to, why is this source important? And to what broad historical theme does this source relate? So in a minute, we'll look at a couple of examples. And let's just move down to the I. So the I is the intended audience. For whom was the source created? So someone created the source, for who? Was it for that person? Was it for like a much broader audience? How might this affect or impact the reliability of a source? So when we're reading something, whether it's a primary source typically or a secondary source, we're trying to ask ourselves, is this true? Is this accurate? And as far as the intended audience, we may not know what the intended audience is. I'm giving you these prompts within HIPP, but for some of these questions, you may not know the answer, or you may need to do some research to find that answer. What person or group does the author intend to inform or influence? So the first P, purpose. Why was this source produced at the time it was produced? And was it produced to inform someone? Was it to just convey information? Is it trying to influence? Is it trying to create people to act? Is it some type of call to action, or is there some other reason? How might this information affect the meaning of the source? So again, we're trying to look at a document and we're trying to figure out, all right, what ideas are coming from or are emanating from this document, so that we can try and like get a better grip on like who created it, they created it for who, did they have any motives for this, and as well as the last P is point of view. So who is the author? So if it's a person, if it's a person's name that we know and is a primary source, you may need to do some research on like who is this person, and do they have a specific point of view? What point is the source trying to convey? Again, all these are kind of linked together, and then analyze anything that might impact the author's point of view or reliability. Again, we're looking at, is it reliable? Is it valid? And when we say anything else, it could be related to gender, social background, economic status, religion, any of those categories. So when we say, hey, analyze a document, HIPP is a nice way of being able to do that. Okay, so the H is historical context, I is intended audience, P is purpose, and the last P is the point of view. So let's just look at an example here. And we won't go through all of HIPP, but here's an example of a document that gets used within my unit on the Middle Ages. Okay, so I actually use this document within an SLD, a student-led discussion. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle tells of invasions of England. So here we have, it's a real short article document here. There's only 4 lines, and then there's a prompt here at the end. So one thing I didn't mention, if you're reading something from a document and you're not sure what the word means, you need to look it up. Because if you don't know what the word means, then you can't possibly analyze an actual document. Okay, so Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, if you're not sure what that is, you need to be able to look it up. So what it is in the 800s, it was initiated by King Alfred. It's chronicling. It's looking at the chronological order of events of like what's happening in England at this time. Okay, so when we're looking at in this year there was a great slaughter in London, in Quintavic, and in Rochester. So obviously it's saying, okay, there's like violence here. Okay, so we see violence. According to their custom, the Northmen plundered. So if you don't know who the Northmen are, then there's no way of being able to like analyze this. So they're talking about the Norsemen. They're talking about the Vikings. And burned the town of Dordrecht, the Northmen with their boats filled with immense booty, including both men and goods, returned to their own country. So when we look at this, we can clearly see that this was created from the English point of view. Okay, it was created by the Anglo-Saxons. So this document is giving us the point of view from the English side, not from the side of the Vikings. At this time period, we also don't have a lot of sources. So this kind of becomes, a source that we kind of rely upon, but we also need to think about it within the context of, well, it is just one side here. For example, according to their custom. I mean, just by looking at that preposition, it's kind of assuming that this is like very common for them. This wasn't like an isolated incident. Okay, so when they say the Northmen plundered, like they came, they took, they stole, they injured, they murdered, they killed, and they burned the towns. And then what they do is they took all this stuff, all these goods with them, and then they returned to their own country, showing that this is not their country. This is not where they're from. Okay. So that's just an example of looking at some of the things that it's like explicitly telling you. Also, you're kind of inferring that the Northmen are like barbarians, that this is happening, after this document is occurring after central government of the Roman Empire. So it's kind of showing that it's kind of like lawless society. It's unsafe. Again, we don't see the words unsafe here, but it definitely kind of, we have to start to infer things as far as like, from this point of view, the Northmen are like bad guys, okay? And as far as from this document, based on the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, you know, the people from London and Quintavik and Rochester and Dordrecht, like they're the good guys, okay? So I hope that was kind of helpful looking at a document. One thing that I wanted to just look at that I think as well as kind of shows the, all right, good. So looking at this document, this is an image based on the Colosseum that was a model that was recreated in the around the 1930s. It's an image of the Colosseum. So if you had to analyze this document, there are no words. So, you know, face value looking at it, yes, it's a building. It's a structure. So we're looking at the architecture of the Colosseum as far as the size, the scope as far as 14 floors, 50,000 people, etc. But I guess, you know, an example of inferring, looking at this document and analyzing it, you could say that the Colosseum really demonstrated the power of the Roman Empire, or the power of the Roman emperor, or, you know, it was an example of the strength of the Roman Empire. And through this Colosseum, it was a place where people came together physically, okay, where people actually united in one specific building. And again, you can make comparisons to this to, you know, athletic arenas, stadiums of today, where we do have like a similar architecture, as well as people cheering, people uniting, you know, people rooting on for their, you know, their person or team that they're rooting for. So again, when we look at these documents that are images, you know, again, use HIPP as a way of coming up with some prompts to help you analyze it. But you need to be able to start to infer things that a document isn't explicitly just telling you, or words that are not contained within the document, especially within an image. So I hope you found this video helpful when you're reviewing a document, or if you're trying to categorize documents. The more analysis you can do, the easier it will be to group the documents and then ultimately work your way through your DBQ. All right, thanks for watching.